Meeting is now being recorded.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jonathan Pollack. I'm the User Support Specialist for HIS here at Quasi. And today we have our second installment of the HIS Spring Cyberseminar series. Just as a reminder, this teleconference is being recorded. And today we are happy to have Dr. Dan Ames, who is an associate professor in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at Brigham Young University. As many of you probably know, Dan is involved in multiple informatics projects within the Quasi community, and today he will be talking about the latest HydroDesktop developments and some of the features and capabilities that are in the works. So without further ado, Dan, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, John. I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate all of you who have joined us today for this conference and cyber seminar. So, as John mentioned, I'll be talking about what's new and what's coming in HydroDesktop. My outline is fairly simple. I do want to review with you some of the goals of HydroDesktop because I know several of you, maybe more, on the phone call or who will be watching this video as it's recorded later, will be relatively new to HydroDesktop, and it will be useful for you to see sort of the big picture and what some of our intentions and goals were. I will present the HydroDesktop user interface and several of the capabilities of the software as it stands. And then, backing up just a little bit, I'll share with you our 1.5 release, which is our current release, some of the things that happened to get us to 1.5, where we're going for 1.6 here in the next few months, and then a couple of more versions down the road. And I'll put out a request for help and input from you all, from the hydrologic community in general. So one of the overarching goals of HydroDesktop is to provide a window into the hydroclimate data deluge. There's a lot that's said nowadays about big data and huge data sources and data that's coming from all over the world and from various online sensors, real-time sensors, in a number of areas of science and engineering. This slide here is not talking about hydrology data, but it's talking about all of the data and information that's generated around the world and how that's increased from 2005 to 2010, almost an order of magnitude. And so it makes me wonder, I haven't seen the numbers for 2013 or 2012, but the data deluge, I think, is a wonderful thing, and HydroDesktop is there to be a small portal window into some of that data, for example, some of the federal data sets. So providing standardized access into these federal data sets is an important goal of HydroDesktop, to make it very simple for a student or a researcher or even an agency person or consultant to be able to quickly find all of the USGS, EPA, NOAA, NASA, other relevant hydroclimate data sets for a particular region through a simple search and query interface is, well, one of the goals. These data sources can sort of be from a number of different domains and occur at a number of different scales. And so what we're indicating here is that we want HydroDesktop to be a means to access data from automated data collection networks, such as real-time data collection activities from satellites, from sensors that are on the ground, and also from observations that are made by hydrologists, scientists, and even citizen scientists and students that are collecting data and putting it into the hydrologic information system of Quasi, or the new Quasi Hydro Data Center, or the up-and-coming HydroShare network. All of those data sources should be accessible and searchable and discoverable through HydroDesktop. We have a goal of supporting local local research networks, and that HydroDesktop can serve as a client tool for these local research networks. For example, here's a picture of the Little Bear River Watershed Network conducted by Utah State University in Jeff Horsborough. And so as these local research networks get put together and organized and start collecting data, we see the value of having that data also searchable and discoverable through a single portal. Perhaps most importantly, and maybe this is sort of overarching, is is to help our data avoid the doorstop fate, where data that is collected over time suddenly becomes unusable because it's sitting in the doorstop. Sometimes, historically, I've heard this called the filing cabinet fate, where the data ends up on sheets of paper and reams of paper sitting in a filing cabinet. I think sort of the modern version of that's the doorstop, because no better purpose could be served by an old computer than setting it in your laboratory to hold the door open. We have this goal at HydroDesktop to be the third leg of the quasi-HIS service-oriented architecture. I suspect most of you on the call are familiar at some level or another with the quasi-HIS service-oriented architecture that involves hosting data in HydroServers or in any kind of a server that is able to speak the Water OneFlow Web Services language. And by allowing your server to speak that language or programming it to speak that language, it can then be registered on this HIS central catalog, or any catalog for that matter, that has the ability to register data sets and keep track of what data sets and services are out there. However, it's one thing to have a great catalog and a number of servers serving up data, but without the ability to discover that data, then we go back in time to the early days of the web, where you sort of have to just know where a website is, and you would type in a URL directly to get to a website. And in the same way, you'd have to just sort of know where a hydrologic data service was and connect to it and find its data. Without a catalog, you'd have to kind of know these things. And if all we had was the catalog and the servers, then we don't have a way to actually look at the data. And that's the role of HydroDesktop on the bottom right-hand side of my screen. So those are the overarching goals of HydroDesktop. Some of the key functionality. It looks like the animations don't occur, John, the way you've uploaded it there. That's what I'm missing. This might also be the problem with the last presentation we had, where some of the graphs weren't coming up. Looks like the animations don't get registered in this way. So if this slide had animations, you would see my text coming up. That would, hold on just one moment. Let me bring up the slide so I can at least tell you what's on the slide. John, I'm tempted to just share this the way we did in our practice yesterday, which is to add my PowerPoint directly. I think it'll keep recording properly.
Sure, Dan, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. So you should be able to stop sharing and then share your screen if you'd like.
Yeah, sorry everybody, hold on one second. Brief intermission. And I will do that right now. Okay. Okay, and is that okay? Can you see this slide?
Yep.
Okay. Well, here were the animations I thought were there a moment ago. Hey, remember that project we had a few years ago? Yeah, that was awesome. What about it? Do you still have any of the data we collected? Yeah, it's all on this computer we use. Excellent. As a doorstop. All right, I just had to drive the point home. So this is the fate we're trying to help avoid with HydroDesktop. Okay, some of the key functions. Search. This is perhaps the most important function of HydroDesktop, to allow users to put in a keyword, an area, a time range, and a service, optionally, and search for data, to make graphs and export that data into Excel or other areas, other software where it might be used, to provide a map-based interface with some basic GIS functions, and also to provide an extension system for additional functionality, hoping that we can rally some of the Hydro community to build new capabilities into the software and allow others to use it through extensions or plugins. So here's a picture of what HydroDesktop looks like when it's up and running. This is for a search area some of you might be familiar with. We've got a lot of data available in the Czech Republic, thanks to some students who have been working in that area. An example search would be to draw a rectangle around the area of interest and to select some keywords, and then to pick a time range, and then to hit run, and in this search we get a little dialog box that tells you the data sets that were found in that study area that was selected. And then I chose the download button on the far right-hand side to actually download that data. So what's happening is, in this case, I've got 6 data series for the Czech Republic that all happen to be precipitation data that I'm downloading. Now that I've downloaded, that data exists locally on a database in my computer, and I can access it directly through the HydroDesktop table viewer. So on the bottom you can see I've clicked the table tab here, and that pulls up a table of the data that were downloaded. I actually have quite a bit more than just the 6 series because I had downloaded some previously. And so I've just turned on checkboxes for some of those, and I can see them show up in the table. Another useful function is to switch over to the tab, or the graph tab, and in the graph tab you have the opportunity to look at the data in time series format. This is an interactive graph, so you can right-click on it and check the point values, copy, save it out, use it in a publication or in a report if that's what you want to do. Some of the graphs include a time series graph, a cumulative frequency plot is the built-in graph type, and there's a built-in histogram type, and also a box and whiskers plot. And all of these are available from choosing buttons up at the top of the software, and it'll just redraw all of your data using the appropriate graphs. I found this to be extremely useful when you just want to do exploring of different data series that you've downloaded from the web. An edit tab allows you to edit the data. You could see a graph of it, remove things like outliers, or fill in. There's a little bit of interpolation allowed, so if you want to interpolate some data points. There is a set of GIS functions, including just being able to switch between different base maps. So here's the city of Prague using the Bing Street Map, the Esri World Street Map, the World Imagery Map. As a GIS guy, these pictures get me a little bit excited, as does the ability to change my symbology and change the way I'm actually using or viewing the data in the map in HydroDesktop. A small printing function is available that allows you to set up a layout view and save that and reuse it later for making printouts. Here I've printed a map and put one of the time series plots on it. Perhaps most usefully is the ability to export data from HydroDesktop to use in third-party software, such as Excel. It just exports it in a common CSV format. And one thing I didn't show on here is that I should potentially highlight here is that the underlying format for the spatial data is shapefile. So all of the data that you see on the map is just being stored in shapefiles in a project folder on your computer. And you can open that in ArcMap or wherever else you want to. One of the plugins that I like to highlight is this Watershed Lineation plugin that allows you to click a point on the map and send off that X and Y location to the EPA, and then the EPA services will return to you within a few minutes a watershed polygon outline, as well as stream center lines and reaches for anywhere in the United States, most places in the United States. So please try that. This is also a great plugin to look at if you're interested in possibly adding your own plugin, and because it's very simple in how it's organized, and it shows building data and working with web services. A more complicated plugin, but also useful, is the HydroOur plugin for those folks who like to do analysis in R and would like to have tight integration with the data sets you just downloaded. You'll see on the left-hand side here all of the data sets. I can select some of those data and click Generate R Code, and it will automatically create R data objects for me based on those data sets. So I generated this code, and then I can send these lines to the console and start working with my data directly in R, which is extremely powerful, as those of you who've used R know. Okay, so that's the big picture of the goals of HydroDesktop and the main user interface elements and key plugins. What's new in HydroDesktop? Well, our last major release was January 7th of this year, and that is official recommended release version 1.5. For those of you who have been following experimental releases, it's the 12th experimental release. So it's 1.5.12 under the hood, but it's officially 1.5 recommended release. It was released January 7th. We're really excited about that because a huge amount of effort went in, particularly late last year, getting a number of annoying bug fixes taken care of. adding several new features and capabilities, and we're really excited about this one because okay, I was muted for a minute there. Now I'm unmuted. So some of the things that we took care of in 1.5, if you've played with HydroDesktop in the past, I understand if you've gotten yourself into any frustrating quandaries that have crashed the software. In fact, when we released a pre-release about 2 years ago, I think it was called 0.7, somebody that I highly respect, I met at AGU and who said to me, hey, I tried your HydroDesktop and it crashed my computer and I had to reinstall Windows. Now, I think that's uncommon, and I actually suspect there were other things going on at that time, but I put that out there somewhat in jest just to let you know that there will be small issues with HydroDesktop. There are probably some things you could do that would crash the software, but I promise you it won't bring down Windows. I don't know what that was all about. 1.5 is very stable, though. You'll see that we fixed 229 bugs and addressed feature requests since the March 13th, 2012 release, including a bunch of unhandled exceptions. Those are the blue screen of death ones, so hopefully there shouldn't be any more of those in there. 10 were related to data download improvements, and 37 improvements related specifically to search. Problems that people were having with different kinds of data sets they wanted to search that weren't there, search activities that were causing grief in the software, and many, many user interface improvements. Also, really a cool addition of 1.5 was that we moved the help system onto a blog that John Pollock maintains at Quasi. So when you go into the help file and or the help menu and you click view help or whatever the button says, it will take you to John's blog. And the great thing about that is that site is always going to be up to date rather than having some file that is downloaded and then installed with the software. Having said that, we do install a version of a PDF-based help file so that you can look at it offline. Improved plotting and graphing, and we worked quite a bit on the GIS attribute table editor that was causing a lot of grief. So there's a very nice attribute table editor with filtering. I encourage you to try it. In fact, in many ways, it's cooler than some of the commercial attribute table editors that are out there in other GIS software. I can say confidently. What's new in HydroDesktop? Also, as part of that 1.5 release, we have now access to 26 new data sources, and that includes the Shale Network, Kansas State Daily Weather, NLDAS, GLDAS data, Ipswich Watershed Association, and many more. Many of these are experimental services that have been put up for testing, but they're there and they are searchable. And it may be that some of these will get pulled into the Quasi Water Data Center, and others will become permanent in their own right as ongoing water data services. The graph at the bottom shows you how many new data sources were registered each year, starting with 28 at the outset in 2008, 9 new ones in 2009, up to 26 that were 26 new data sources that were added in 2012. I also want to highlight, and with apologies to Kathleen for not asking if I could use her photo, but it's off the web, so I guess she's already made it available for people to see. But Kathleen McKee has been a wonderful chair of the HIS Users Committee for the last couple of years, and we have been working on the HydroDesktop team to be actively engaged with her and the user committee. This has involved having monthly meetings to discuss real-world needs and challenges for users of HIS. Also, the user committee has done extensive testing on HydroDesktop and is actually creating probably the second major report now they've put together on HydroDesktop testing that includes a number of issues and suggestions and will help us to prioritize going forward. So we don't have this case of a bunch of programmers trying to figure out what we all think is great and hoping that we'll build it and others will come. It's great to have real-world boots on the ground HIS users to make these decisions for us as we move forward. So that's also new. Now, 1.5 was released in January. Our HydroDesktop development team, group, and user committee and Quasi have been working full steam ahead for the last month since January to get ready for a 1.6 release. Our goal for 1.6 is to release it at the HIS conference in Logan, Utah, July 2013. So there's a plug for that conference. If you're not aware of that conference, I don't know. I know I don't have the technical term for the conference here. I believe it's hydroinformatics, hydrologic information systems and data, something like that. So we'll get the correct name here in a moment. Please look it up. You can find it on the Quasi website. We'll have a new release of HydroDesktop then. But in the meantime, we are releasing experimental 1.6 releases. To get to those, you just have to get on the HydroDesktop website and register your name, and then you'll be able to see in the downloads the hidden releases. You click hidden releases and you can see 1.6.2 or 3 up there, which is the current experimental. We've hit 35 issues already, and a number of key improvements that are coming along that we're quite excited about include auto-updating of extensions. What this means is that just like on your iPhone or your Android phone, you get a notice every so often that says, hey, your version of Words with Friends has been updated, or was just updated, or a new version is available, and it either happens automatically or you can click and have that update put in. We wanted to provide the same kind of capability to HydroDesktop so that you don't have to always download a whole install. But if you're using that EPA Watershed Lineation plugin and suddenly the US EPA changes their service, which has already happened to us a couple of times, if they change the protocol for calling that, we can just simply release the new version of that plugin. And if you're running 1.6, what will happen is the next time you start, it'll either automatically get it, or based on the settings you supply, it'll just notify you that that new plugin's available. Click a button and it'll just put it in for you without having to mess around. So we're excited about that because it'll help keep the software up to date, make it more useful for people. Big improvements to the keyword search interface. I'll just say watch for that coming. It's actually already there in the experimental release. It's not quite as, we were a little clunky before in the keywords. Download setting to control the number of downloaded series per server hit means that if you're downloading massive data sets, you may want to download fewer at a time or more at a time, so that's something that can be controlled. And just maybe a small thing, but also a very valuable one, is in the print view. When you create that print layout, you can save it to an image or a JPEG, bitmap, or PNG. I believe it's PNG is the default. So those are all things that you can test right now if you'd like to try that experimental. I will tell you that the way HydroDesktop is architected, you can have multiple versions on your computer, and they just go into separate folders. So when you install 1.6, it'll go into a 1.6 folder, and it lives independently of 1.5. We've done that by making sure we use only .NET components, which means that there's no system registry. For those of you that are familiar with registration problems with DLLs, we keep everything completely separate, so you can run them separately and you can uninstall them separately, and they don't affect each other. Here's an example of that auto-updating of extensions. You can choose to have those extensions auto-updated. Here's a view of our current App Store for extensions. We did pull a few extensions out of the default install for the current version. 1.5 is a little bit lighter weight. It doesn't include geoprocessing, kriging, or hydromodeler. But those are available to you if you pull them out of the online plugin store, and you can install them there. And then that same place, you can choose to do auto-updating of your plugins. Keyword refactoring. Here's a picture of how the new keyword refactoring looks. You'll see that you just simply start typing a term, and it pops up all of the terms. Or if you want to see 3,000 keyword possibilities, just hit the drop-down and start cycling through them. Once you, let's see, if that's not satisfactory enough and you want to add multiple keywords, then you click this button, Select Multiple Keywords. We were really struggling with what to call that, and we went through a number of them with the programmers, like multiple or many or lots, trying to figure out how to do that. And I believe it was one of the members of our HIS users committee who said, how about just type Select Multiple Keywords? And it was a no-brainer. So the point is highlighting the value of having real users who want a sort of easy to understand software interface. When you click it, it brings up this keywords dialog that many of you have seen before. However, we've made this box here have the same function as this one, which is as you start typing, it will bring up all of the keywords that have the term that you're typing. And you can add them to the list and bring it back, and it will just say that you have multiple selected. in this box here. So that's the keyword refactoring. So what is coming down the road in HydroDesktop? Beyond 1.6, which will be released at the HIS users and, well, I guess the Hydroinformatics conference. Boy, I better find out the right name for that conference. Beyond that, we will have 2.0 released at AGU 2013. This is our goal. And that should include a number of ongoing improvements, stability improvements, interface improvements that come about through consultation with the user committee and also from you that are listening to this call as you decide to send in your suggestions and improvements. More and better sample data sets and projects. Right now there are just a few sample data sets that are shipped with HydroDesktop. We look forward to adding new data sets that are shipped, and also the App Store tool allows you to choose new data sets. So for 2.0 you'll be able to choose if you really would like to bring down a detailed data set for the small nation of Bahrain. Well, I don't see why we can't have those exist as data sets in the data store that a limited group would want, and you just grab them and pull them in. And even though we're calling a data store, be aware that all of the plugins and data sets that are available now are all free and open source, as is the main HydroDesktop package. We're looking forward to adding more data download options. For example, rather than just doing a search and then going to your search results to pull data, we're looking forward to adding OGC WFS data sets as a way you can search. So what that means is if you have a connection to a data layer on a server somewhere, we'll just let you point to that data server, and it'll show up that data in your map, and then you can choose those to download into HydroDesktop. Likewise, if you simply have a shapefile of known locations of data that you'd like to use as a search layer, well, we'll let you just bring that in and search it. Also, new capabilities for data upload are coming in the 2.0 release. And when I say new capabilities for data upload, any capabilities for data upload in HydroDesktop will be new. Now, whether all of these are available in 2.0 or they're going to have to wait till 2.1 or 2.2, we'll see, but the goal is to have data uploading in HydroDesktop, for example, to the Quasi data center. And we'll be working over the next year with Quasi and the Quasi data center to have, or excuse me, the Quasi water data center, that's to say, to allow authentication of data uploading for end users of HydroDesktop, or to an individual HydroServer Lite or HydroServer Full data server. HydroServer Lite has user management built in. If you haven't seen it, it's simply a Linux-based PHP lightweight version of the full HydroServer. It uses Google Maps, PHP, and MySQL, and it's used primarily right now for small research laboratories that want to put up a server in an afternoon without a whole lot of effort. And also it's being used in a couple of places for citizen science portals where they want the citizens to be able to go in and hit the web page, click a login, and actually enter their data observations through the web page directly. So we're planning to tie HydroDesktop into HydroServer Lite for data uploading. And ultimately to HydroShare. So I'm sure more will be said on these seminars in the future about HydroShare, where sort of a YouTube/Facebook for hydrologic data sharing and model sharing. So we have a mandate to make HydroDesktop talk to HydroShare. So although I've listed all of this stuff here under 2.0, not all of it will be available necessarily by December, but it's the vision moving forward. Another piece of the vision is to supply an analytical toolbox for spatiotemporal operations, much like the one that exists in the Esri ArcGIS product. We've got an experimental toolbox available right now that you can pull off of the extension store, but it's being improved. And another big picture, sort of post-AGU, post-2.0, is to support users of Macintosh and Linux computers natively. And we actually have, this is a picture that was sent to me just last week from some of my programmers here at BYU who have successfully ported major portions of the underlying mapping engine of HydroDesktop. The underlying mapping engine is called .spatial, and it's written in the C# programming language, which does run with this mono, thanks to the help of this mono software, it'll run inside of a Linux or a Mac environment. So this is very exciting, and this is like hot off the press. So those of you that happen to call into the conference call today, you're seeing something which maybe is not a big deal to you, but it's very exciting to me because this is the first baby step toward making HydroDesktop itself run natively on Mac Linux. Also in the future for HydroDesktop, and again this is sort of in that 2.0 plus realm, is to support Python scripting as common or even less common tasks. Those of you who are very familiar with Python, you'll appreciate this slide because if you read deep into the documentation of Python, you will learn that this programming language was developed was named not after the snake, but after the flying circus. And we will continue to be forming tighter integration with HydroShare for sharing of scripts, models, and data. And if you want to know what HydroShare is, don't type in hydroshare.org to find out, because you'll be greeted with a coming soon page. But probably the best way to find out what HydroShare is to join the open HydroShare mailing list and participate with, which you can find through the Kawazi website. So please join us if you're interested. What I'm sharing, okay, thanks. John just posted a note for the link to learn more about HydroShare. I put up this slide to give credit and kudos to some of the core development team of HydroDesktop. On the right-hand side is Yuri Kadlitz. On the top is Ping Yang. On the kind of middle left is Yang Chao. And on the far left is Carlos Osorio Murillo. And these are some of the folks who brought HydroDesktop to life. And now we have them and others around the, well, honestly, around the world, in a few little pockets of places where people are helping build some plugins and tools for HydroDesktop, as well as the team here at BYU. We would be very happy to have more of you join us and others who watch this video later. Ways you can join and help is, first of all, just to download the software. Remember, I can't say too many times that it's free because, maybe that sounded wrong. I need to continually remind people that this is a free and open software package because almost without doubt when I give this lecture or one like this, somebody raises their hand virtually or in human form and says, and how much does this cost? This is free across the board. The underlying GIS engine is open source also, so it's free, which means that every bit of this is available for you to get and use and help us and use for your own purposes, whatever purpose that may be, for educational, commercial, academic, or otherwise, research or otherwise. So please go ahead and try it. Go to the download page, try using it. Explore the user guide. If you click on user guide here, then you'll get access to the blog that I mentioned earlier that John Pollock has developed. Please feel free to read information there. That is the latest and most up-to-date source of end-user information for HydroDesktop. There are, if you find other user files, tutorials, or documents, they may be slightly out of date. So we're trying to move everything into this blog and hope that you'll go look at it there. You'll also notice on this toolbar a forum button. If you click that forum button, it will take you to the developer forum for HydroDesktop, which is a great place to go in and ask a question such as, hey, is this particular data set available? Or even better, hey, I just made this particular data set available on HIS, so please feel free to use this in HydroDesktop. You can also ask questions about functionality, talk about needs, desires, expectations, etc. on that open discussion forum. Next to that is a button that says Issues, and if you click on that one, it will actually take you to the live real-time issue tracker for HydroDesktop. We decided 3 or 4 years ago when we started this software just to have all of our dirty laundry hanging out for the world to see and not worry about it. So what you'll find when you go there is you can see our open issues and open requests for features, known bugs. You'll also be able to see all of the closed fixed ones that I listed earlier. They're all there. You could just sort through those issues if you're interested in doing that or having a student or a colleague do that. Likewise, you may enter your own bugs or issues there. There's also a contact support and an about button on this page. So as you try HydroDesktop, please feel free to use those buttons. John Pollock is also happy to give you his personal mobile telephone number, and you can call him and ask him any question, anytime, night or day, and on the weekends. And if you couldn't tell, I was slightly joking there. I wish it was April 1st still. But no, honestly, John is great, and he is a user support specialist and is truthfully willing to talk to anybody about any component that Quasi is sponsoring and working with, including HydroDesktop. We need specific help in testing, writing lab manuals, building plugins, adding, sort of generating new ideas. And if anybody has anybody that you are familiar with who's an expert in .NET and Mono and Macintosh porting, and or would be willing to do a little bit of testing on the Mac Linux side of things, that's something that I happen to be particularly interested in at this exact moment. And this, by the way, in the background here is the actual HydroDesktop website if you haven't seen it. The HydroDesktop website is really the developer side. It's the CodePlex website. And so a lot of the things you'll see there will be targeted on developers, such as the issue tracker and the source code, which you can click here and just download a zip file of the whole source code of the whole project if you want. So most importantly is this download button right here. You'll be able to see that we've got a lot going on, including, in the last 7 days, 350 downloads. So that's exciting to me. It says that we've got activity going on. And that's the end of my formal presentation, with this final plea to volunteer your students and your time and your effort, if you have it, to work on this project with us. Ultimately, I know there are a lot of ways to spend time and money, and if at the end of the day you find that you've got a project in your department or your division or your school or your agency where there's a need to write a small script to do something, then you might consider, instead of writing that from scratch, or instead of writing it as a MATLAB tool or an ArcGIS script, which would require your end user to have a license, you might consider seeing what it would take to write it as a HydroDesktop plugin. And honestly, if that's something you're interested in doing, then I will give you my mobile number, and you may call me anytime, night or day, or on weekends, because I'm so enthusiastic to have new contributors and programmers adding functionality that I would be happy to do that. And so, like I said, that's the end of my formal presentation. This is the vision going forward. I hope to see that our HIS programmer, developer, and user community for the broader HIS, but specifically for HydraShare also, can grow and be as big and vibrant as the OSGeo programmer user community, which this is a photo of. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dan, for your presentation. And now I'd like to open it up for questions. And the way this is going to work is, if you have a question, please do type it into the chat box, and I'll read the questions aloud, just in case, if we have someone that is participating but more audio rather than visual. So we have a question from Bill. Dan, is anyone working on being able to ingest peak flow values from a USGS gauge?
Good question. I don't personally know the answer to that. And is that something that comes from the USGS instantaneous instant values? I don't believe that it is. What I can tell you is that this is a good question that probably needs to go to the broader HIS team. But I know that that USGS has been actively working to support more water one-flow data services natively on their database. So rather than having USGS services being routed through the catalog, which happens now, then USGS has, in many ways, bought into this idea of web services-based data sharing. And I know that there is a bit of an initiative to apply the quasi water one-flow web services and or WaterML 1 or 2 onto their data sets, so that as that happens, then I suspect more and more of the USGS data services or data sets will be available in that way. And then once they are, then they will be available also on HydroDesktop.
We also have a question from Effie. What's the license on HydroDesktop? I think Dave already answered this question in the chat box, but if you want to address any of the licensing.
Yeah, great. I appreciate the question and the answer, because I did make a point 3 times of saying that it is free and open source, but of course somebody who's attuned will ask the appropriate next question, which is under what license. And I saw David's answer pop up as new BSD, And that's, in fact, the license that most of the quasi-HIS tools, perhaps all of them, are being licensed under. We chose that license just as an FYI. Many folks may not be familiar with the different types of open source licenses. There are viral open source licenses that say that if you use this code or these libraries in your application, then you must also make your application open source under the same terms. We avoided that because we really would like this to go to a broader user base, including even consultants and consulting engineering companies and others that might want to use this in more of a commercial environment. So NewBSD is effectively about a 1.5 paragraph license that says that this software is developed by Quasi and it's copyrighted, and you can do effectively whatever you would like with it. Just don't sue us if it blows up your computer and makes you reinstall Windows. Effectively, that's the license. You're welcome to look at it. See.
So it looks like we have,
by the way, Don, you'll see that, I should have mentioned, you'll see that license when you look at the HydroDesktop homepage. One of the main buttons on the top is the license, because we want everybody to be aware of that. Go ahead.
I thought we had another question coming in, but it looks like participants stopped typing. So if anyone else has any questions, now would be the time. Otherwise, if I don't see anyone typing, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this week, and especially thank you to our presenter, Dan, who will actually be participating as a presenter again next week, along with Dr. Yoram Rubin of the University of California at Berkeley. And Dan and Yoram are going to be discussing inverse modeling with the MAD model inversion framework, which, Dan, if you'd like to plug this, I believe it's a plug-in for HydroDesktop, correct?
Correct. It is set up to run standalone or as a plug-in for HydroDesktop, and it's an inverse modeling technique and framework that allows you to take, for example, a ModFlow or a Hydrus or in the future additional models and do inverse modeling and look at parameter distributions for unmeasurable parameters. So those of you that are in the groundwater world, you know a lot about inverse modeling, and if you don't, then you're welcome to join the call next week. We'll talk a little bit about the MAD technique, which is a new technique that Dr. Rubin has put together over the last few years, and it's we'll also talk about how we've implemented it in software and tied it into the Quasi HydroDesktop package.
Great. Well, thanks again, Dan, and thank you to all of our attendees today. This video of the Cyberseminar will be available online on YouTube later this week. If you'd like to receive a notification of whenever it's available, please feel free to email me. My email address is jpollak@quasi.org. Otherwise, I hope to see you all again next week. Thank you very much.